welcome to another episode of How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. My name is Christine, and I am the host of the show and your feeding therapist for today. And today we're going to be talking about food-related anxiety. And a lot of our kids, I'm going to be honest, we actually usually get the most severe kids who are very resistant to eating new foods. They're actually a little bit fearful of new foods and can sometimes melt down completely. So we're going to talk about some of our top 5 tips that you can implement starting today for your child. If they are anxious around foods, if they're anxious about trying new foods, these are things that you can use right away to bring down that anxiety and start to make them more comfortable around foods, because they're not going to start to explore foods or be interested in putting them in their mouth, of all places, right? They're not going to be interested in doing that if their anxiety is raised, if they're on high alert, right? So we want to bring down that anxiety, make them calm, make them happy around food, so that they will then want to explore the foods, right? Because think about yourself, like you're not going to explore a new environment if you feel like you are in trouble, right? Like imagine you go into an area that's just clearly isn't safe, like a dark alley, right? You're on guard. You are not like, let me explore. Is there artwork here? What is there? What does that smell? Like it's not a safe place, right? So our kids, when they feel like they're not in a safe place, they're not going to be curious about foods. They're not going to be exploring foods. So we have to bring down that anxiety level. So here's how we're going to do it. All right, number 1, the power of routine. And this is a simple one, and this, it might be already happening in your house that you have a routine, and maybe it's not, and either is okay. But even if you do have a routine, there's probably some things that we can change about the routine to make it even a little bit more predictable and safe, and start to incorporate some other skills and layers in there that can maybe help move our meal times forward. So, for example, maybe you have a routine where they wash their hands, they come sit down, maybe you say a prayer or light a candle before your meal. Or maybe the routine is you take the iPad and you bring it in and they sit it on the table, and then they sit in their seat, right? You might have some routines, but I bet we can expand on them a bit. So think about maybe how we can expand, like maybe instead of having their plate set, maybe they have to, take food from a larger dish in the middle of the table, like family style, and put it onto their plate. If you don't want them doing that because you think they're going to take like the wrong portions of each type of food, or it's too messy or whatever, there's too much going on, don't worry about that one. We can do other things. We can maybe say one good thing that happened today, right? Remember, we're trying to bring down their anxiety. So maybe we can start by talking about something positive. Doesn't even have to be about food, right? Might be to tell something funny that happened, or something that you're looking forward to happening maybe later that night or the next day, right? So we just want to start getting positive talk, positive feelings going, right, for this mealtime. You could do things, of course, like washing your hands, or maybe the one thing that you want to add is that they have to help you and by serving you. So even if they're not putting the food on their plate, maybe they'll be willing to take a spatula and put a chicken cutlet onto your plate or something along those lines, right? So think about your routine. Think about how maybe you can add in 1 or 2 things that might create a new experience moving towards different foods, or just something positive in general. Like I said, those stories, something funny, so it doesn't have to be about food, but it can be, of course. So number 2, gradual exposure to new food. So with anxiety, whenever, like, I remember, I had a phobia of vomiting for a very long time. It's called emetophobia, actually, if you didn't know that. But I remember when I went to therapy for it, and I was in college at that time, and it was like exposure therapy, right? So it was like very small doses. I would get exposed to it, and we would start off really small. Like maybe it was just talking about it, then maybe it was a picture, right? So we kind of want to do that with food, but it does happen in a bit of a different way. And a lot of people might have, or maybe they've seen or have heard or of the SOS approach, where you're, touching it, then you're smelling it, then you're licking it. And I want to tell you that the SOS approach, that's not exactly what it is. Of course, that's a part of it, but that's not like the only component of it. Like that chart, people take that and they follow it like the Bible, but that's not exactly like when you take the course, that's not exactly what she teaches. There's much more to it than that. That was a little digression, um, but anyway, back to the small incremental exposure. So of course, they're foods that are their safe foods. We never want to mess with their most nutrient dense safe foods, but we want them to become more flexible. So making really small changes in mealtime can go a really long way. And you want to start small. It might be that maybe instead of cutting it up into squares or triangles, maybe some of the triangles aren't perfect today. Maybe, if they're always squares, maybe we try circles, or maybe we try all squares and just one circle, right? You might just go really, really slow, but changing one small thing about it, we want them to become more flexible. And when they start to feel safe within those small changes, then we can make bigger changes, right? Okay, so gradually exposing them to new changes or new foods. So before you even start with new foods, we want to be able to change something about the foods they're already eating before you get into putting new foods on their plate. And putting new foods on their plate, right? We actually have that's included in our program. We teach you how to do that. And we also have a plating strategies course that's, I think, maybe like $20 or $30 that kind of teaches you a little bit more about how to put foods on the plate and things like that. But it's really hard to give specific advice about this because every child's sensory system is a little bit different and the foods that you're starting with are going to be different. But in general, you want to follow some sort of sensory pathway where you're putting on foods that are somewhat similar to what they have now in some of the sensory properties. Right. So, it might be like if you're doing bread, you might do other things that are brown and crunchy, right? Or if you're doing, maybe if they only eat goldfish, maybe you're doing other sort of crackers that are yellow or orange, right? That's the idea. But again, it's going to really depend on their sensory system and how flexible or inflexible they are. Right. So if you don't know where to start with that, if you don't know like how severe is the problem, you can take our quiz at thepickeaterstest.com. And my program, Unlocking Mealtimes, we actually walk you through exactly what to do step by step in the specific order that would work best for your child. Right. It's very individualized, this program, because we want them to see success as fast as possible, right? So when you know what their sensory system is, it's much easier to pick out and tell you which foods might be best. And more importantly, it's teaching you to know which foods make the most sense so that you can carry it over during the week when we're not talking, when we're not together. Okay. So that was number 2, gradual exposure with new food. Number 3, creating a calm environment. Distraction-free is going to be a much later goal than our kids that have anxiety around food. That distraction is probably the only reason they might be even eating or sitting for food at all. Right. So we don't want to just take that distraction away. But if there are ways to make the environment calmer, again, this is where knowing your child's sensory profile is so key because, if things like bright lights normally bother your child, maybe dimming the lights is going to be helpful. Or maybe dimming the lights is like not the right move to make. Right. So it's really hard to give you specifics that's going to work for your child. But I will tell you, knowing your child's sensory system, you might be able to figure out some ways that, or some things that that are calming for them. Maybe they really love music. So having some music on in the background might be really helpful. Or maybe putting on music really energizes them and it'll make them not sit in their seat, right? So you have to know your kid, but thinking about ways to even declutter the eating environment, having less things to look at. So it might even just be turning their chair. So instead of facing out and seeing like the whole kitchen, maybe you're turning their chair and they're more looking at the wall or a corner that has less distraction and less things to see. So it's less overwhelming, less overstimulating, right? Things like that. So there might be some small changes you could make there that could help kind of bring them down, make them calmer. Okay, that's 3, creating a calm environment. So far we have routines, gradual exposure, creating a calm environment. Number 4. Okay, so this is being mindful. This encompasses a few things. Being mindful about what we're talking about, how much we're talking to them, and you know, even being mindful, like with the food, like, I don't know if you've ever done an exercise of mindfulness, but when you do, it's usually like you're really taking your time, you're using all of your senses. What does it smell like? Take a deep breath in. What does it feel like? Let it sit in your mouth for a while. It's like that very slow process, right? But mindfulness can also be something that we are doing as the parent, right? So we have to be mindful of, am I asking them too many questions? Am I talking too much? Right? Sometimes we're just eagerly looking at them like, do you like it? How is it? How is your day? And you're just sort of one question after the next, like an interrogation or an interview of some sort, right? So thinking about, stopping the commenting, stopping, or actually stopping the questions and starting to comment, right? If you don't know what to say, we can always go back to the 5 senses, right? We can talk about, oh, that looks very, it looks very round, or you got some really round blueberries there, right? So you don't have to, and I'll tell you the difference, right? So when you're asking questions, the kids know that they're supposed to be responding in some way, right? Even if it's just a yes or no, anything where you're put on the spot to answer a question will raise your anxiety level, even if it's just your mom, right? It's so much easier when someone just makes a comment because there's no expectation to respond, right? Someone could say, "Oh, what a nice day." You don't have to say anything about that. Or someone might say, "Those are really green," or "That looks like a tree." That doesn't mean that you have to respond to that, right? So that should automatically start bringing their anxiety down. But I'm telling you, questions are going to just raise their anxiety. So no questions. If you have to talk, use some comments and use them about the 5 senses. That's something I've definitely mentioned in probably several of my videos before. Okay. Now, number 5, avoiding bribes and pressure. Okay. So, how you offer the foods without creating stress is so important, right? So if you are going to be like, I'm going to give you this food, and if you eat it, if you taste it, if you lick it, if you touch it, you will get ice cream, or you will get your game, or you'll get to go outside, or you'll get your friend to come over, right? Whatever it is. But anything like that is going to put an imbalance of power between that food and whatever it is that they want. And it's going to make whatever they want go really high, and it's going to make that food look really bad. It's going to be like, well, I guess I have to suffer through this to get that other cool thing that I want. Some kids are going to be willing to make that sacrifice, but that doesn't mean that they like the food, and that doesn't mean that they're going to eat it the next time. If anything, it might mean that the next time they're going to be less likely to eat it, right? So we want them to be interested in the foods on their own. And that strategy of bribing and putting pressure is not going to lead to that relationship that you want them to have with food, which is, hey, I want to try that. That looks good. That looks interesting. Can I have more? Right? If we want those types of phrases to come out of our kids' mouth, we can't put the pressure and the bribes on them to start. Okay. And also, you might not be thinking that this is pressure, but staring at them expectantly or saying, like, do you like it? Isn't it good? It's good, right? Mommy made it really tasty for you, right? Right? That's pressure too, because maybe your kids are people pleasers. Maybe they don't want to hurt your feelings. And you know what? You could even have the opposite. Maybe they love it, but because you asked or because you said it, they're going to say the opposite, right? So it's best not to ask questions. Don't talk about it too much. Like I said, stick to the comments if you have to say something. Those are always usually pretty safe. The comments and the especially about the five senses, right? Because I will make a caveat. Of course, you can make a comment that's like, well, I see your brother's been eating this, but not you. Yeah, that wasn't a question, but that still doesn't help, right? So you can make comments that are unhelpful, I suppose. But again, if you stick to those five senses, you're going to be in a good place, right? So there's no pressure with five senses. It's just observations. And it's the beginning of them hopefully decreasing their yuck, gross, bad, and increasing their more scientific language, right? When you talk about something using more objective terms that don't hold a positive or negative, right? Something that's wet can be positive or negative. You could say it's yucky, or you can say it's wet, right? But which one is going to lead to the better relationship with food, right? If you're saying it's wet and we can start to get them into the mindset of talking about food by its properties, we take some of the emotion out of the food and of that specific food in that experience, right? So that will be, even if you just did those things, I bet you're going to see some amazing results. And I can't wait to hear what they are. Please DM, comment below. I'd love to hear about, what changes your child, or like what like ahas maybe you had from this. I'd love to hear about that. So again, let's just do a quick recap. 5 things to decrease anxiety. Okay, so we're going to be doing routines or adding to our routines, maybe changing something about your routines. Okay, and it could be related to food or just positive in general while at that table eating the food. Okay. Number 2, gradual exposure. And sometimes that gradual exposure is really starting with just gradual changes in their current foods, right? Number 3, creating a calm environment, right? So we talked about knowing your child's sensory system, knowing things that relax them versus overstimulate them, and how important that could be. Even doing things maybe like changing the position of their chair to see like what they're looking at so they're not too overstimulated. It might be about sounds or lighting, right? It could be about decreasing clutter in the area, just so there's just like a little bit less to, take in their senses. Okay. Now 4, mindfulness. So we talked about how you can be mindful with things that you're saying, your comments, questions, right? And it could also be mindfulness about experiencing the food a little bit more deeply. Like, wow, well, when I touch it, what does that feel like? Or let's like really spend some time touching it, or smelling it, or licking it, or whatever. But so it could be, those 2 different aspects within mindfulness. And last 5 is avoiding bribes and pressure, because we don't want to, be making the, if you have something on the other side of that bribe that sounds really, really desirable, like a dessert or a game or maybe extra TV time or whatever, then that is going to be on that pedestal, and the food is going to just drop lower. And we don't want that to happen. We also don't want, like I said, putting pressure, like asking, like, do you like it? Mommy made it so good, right? That's also pressure to respond. Like, they're going to a lot of times just to say yes, that they do like it. And that's why I hear so many times parents will say, like, they tried this food the other week. They said they liked it. And then the next time I bought it for them, and the next time they wouldn't eat it. And I was like, yeah, they might have just said that they liked it. Like, you might have asked, like, do you like that? Right? And they said yes. And you were like, oh my gosh, they said they liked it. That was amazing. I'm going to get some more. And they didn't actually like it. They just thought that that's what you wanted to hear. So that's what they said, right? Kids are smart. They're like, okay, what's the quickest way to get mom off my back? Oh yeah, just say I'll like it because that's what she wants me to say, right? But that's not the truth. We want them to be honest with us. So, keep those principles in mind when you are trying to decrease your child's anxiety around food. I am certain that if you are able to implement some of those, that you're going to see some great changes. But if you really want to go deeper with this, if you don't really know your child's sensory profile, if you're not sure how their oral motor skills are, and what the connection is here, or maybe they might have a gut issue that you've missed. And honestly, none of these things are really going to help much if you have a gut issue that's been sort of undiagnosed. Like, if food is making your kids uncomfortable in any way, that has to be addressed first, because their anxiety is not going to go away until they're feeling good, right? That's like first and foremost. So we do all of these things in our course, right? We encompass all of the 4 pillars of feeding. We walk you through, we hold your hand step by step, we evaluate your specific child, give you that guidance one-to-one so that you can see success as fast as possible. If this sounds like something you're interested in, you can start with our Picky Eaters test. Go to pickyeaterstest.com, find out what type of child you are, and now you can actually book a call with me to get a little bit more help and one-to-one of, is this the right way for me to go? Is this course going to work for me? Because sometimes it's not. And I'll be absolutely honest, like, especially if you have a tube-fed kid, there's a few more things that you would have to do beyond what this course entails. Like, this would not probably be the right thing. But if you have a tube-fed kid who has already been eating, it might be a different story. So if you're like, I don't know, I'm on the fence about this, you can jump on a call and we can try to work through, and I could give you that insight if this would be helpful, or if not, if it's not going to be helpful for you, I'll try to give you my best ideas on where you can go for help, right? So we hope to see you there on the inside. If not, I'll see you next week, and I hope you guys have a great week with a lot of happy meals. All right, see you then.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.